All right, welcome in college football week 11. It is here, and my goodness, it's the part of the season in college football where teams trying to get themselves bowl eligible, a bunch of teams vying for those top 12 spots to make it to the brand new college football playoff, and we've got a bunch of really good games that we're going to break down for you here on the show, including a game tonight with FAU and East Carolina. And of course, we're going to talk about the U as they take on their old nemesis, Georgia Tech. We got Navy, South Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, and South Carolina and Vandy for a roundtable discussion as we welcome in the Thursday crew of the college football kickoff show. The Penn, Ralph Michaels in the house. Drew Martin, he's got his own pen, in fact, in the house. Rob Veno just has earphones. That's it. No pen for him. Oh, no, wait. He's got another pen. We are 3 for 3 with pens. Good Christ. I got a screwdriver. I'm not sure if that's the same, but we're all holding something, I guess. Ralph, you are going to kick it off for us here because we got a game coming up tonight. FAU taking on East Carolina. What is the word I'm looking for that describes both these teams? Yes, suck. I think is the word I'm looking for, Ralph, because both these teams not having the kinds of seasons they thought they would. I don't know, man. What is going on with FAU? They can't figure out the quarterback spot. East Carolina at home, Ralph. What are we doing in this game tonight?
Yeah, I mean, this could come down as one of the worst Thursday college football games in the history of college football. So, I'm not counting any Maction games, but this is as bad as it gets. And, you look at Florida Atlantic, is Herman on his way out? Who knows? It's his second year. You've seen the frustrations. FAU was the bully for a while, and now all of a sudden he calls out USF for running up the score, and he gets all upset. So, you look at FIU, they have a win against Wagner, and a win against FIU. That's a pretty ugly season so far. And now the last 3 games, North Texas, the offense looked decent, 519 yards, but they can't turn it into a win. UTSA, they get boat raced. And then the USF game last name, the box score looks good, 485 to 525. But when you get sacked 7 times, that takes you out of your offensive momentum. In fact, the FAU O-line has allowed 7 sacks in back-to-back games against UTSA and South Florida. Now, East Carolina had their own issues. This was an exciting time for them. They started 2-0 against Norfolk State and Old Dominion. They then lose against App State by 2 points and Liberty. Not bad losses. The UTSA win is great. What happens? They get to Charlotte. That is a horrible loss, losing to Charlotte by 31 points and then turning that into another loss the next week, going to Army. They fire their head coach, Houston. They bring in an interim. They have a bye. And while you say, oh, my God, everything got straightened out after the bye, they put up 56 points against Temple and 499 yards. Hold your horses on that. It still is Temple. So we don't know if they made a transition or not. I will say this. Garcia started the first 5 games of the season. He got yanked a couple games ago, and now you do have a new quarterback in Caitlin House. Garcia, by the way, had an 8-12 ratio his first 5 games. Caitlin House, an 8-4 ratio since taking over as the starting job. And statistically, East Carolina is a dominant team. The schedules are basically even. And you have an East Carolina team that is number 51 in yards per play diff against an FAU team that is only 98. And one thing to bring up, when teams have 6 losses and 2 wins like FAU does, and they have at least back-to-back losses, you have a lot of pressure because you have to win out to get to a bowl. Well, those teams that are 2-6 and lost at least their back-to-back games are only 22-36 against the spread. That is 38%. And if the opponent is off a win, like East Carolina is, that falls back to 31.5%. Teams have a lot of pressure when they get to their 6th loss playing, especially on the road. I think that pressure has the Owls implode. I do lean East Carolina tonight.
All right, leaning towards East Carolina. And again, the game may be absolutely atrocious. Doesn't mean you can't make money on it, folks. I will just remember that. Keep that in mind. Not a great game there with FAU and ECU, but somebody's got to win it, and that means there is a ticket worth cashing. There's also a very interesting game happening involving a South Florida team. And Drew, you know all about this, you and I, unfortunately, as the U will be taking on Georgia Tech this week. Now, for those of you that don't know, I almost ended it all and ran out into traffic after this game last year as I lost my ass on Mario Cristobal, who thought it would be great instead of just running the clock out by having his quarterback kneel. Instead, thought it'd be a great option just to hand the ball off and fumble it, and then give Georgia Tech the opportunity 44 seconds later to score the winning touchdown. Remember it well, Drew, and the Fire Mario chants were loud. But I guarantee you this, if they have a lead late in this game, I'm going to bet Mario is not handing the ball off, Drew, in this spot here against Georgia Tech. The question is, will they have a lead late in this game? It's still a pretty big number, and Georgia Tech has been a giant pain in the ass to the U over the years.
They really have, Joe. And I mean, you bring up last season. I was actually at that game.
Oh.
And to see the Miami fans and their faces when that went down, that's one of those games you're going to remember for years to come. And Mario Cristobal obviously took it on the chin there. Coming back this time, they're having to go on the road. They're heading up to the ATL. Anytime, Miami goes on the road this time of year, it always brings question marks into my mind, particularly having to lay double digits here. Bobby Dodd, one of my favorite college football stadiums out there, and Georgia Tech, hey, they might get their quarterback, Haynes King, back. And if you remember last year's game, the play that he made, it wasn't only the fumble, they had to go down and score. They hit a big play. He's a guy that he really changes things. He's worth a lot to the point spread for Georgia Tech. So if he does play, we're likely to see a sizable move here, in my opinion, Joe. But in betting this game, it really comes down to, if it's not broken, don't fix it in the sports betting business. And Miami to the over is not broken in any possible case. I mean, this team just cashes overs. Their offense, number one in the country, yards per play, number one yards per game margin. Cam Ward, a Heisman favorite. They're going to keep looking to kind of get his stats up. If Miami does have the lead, they're going to continue to look to score. And really their weakness is on the defensive side. I mean, they've let up over 30 points in 4 straight games, over 40 points in one of those games. I think Georgia Tech's going to be able to move the football as well, Joe. This is an offensive line that's only let up 4 sacks all season long. So, hey, if Georgia Tech's able to score, which I think they will be, Miami's 8-1 to the over. Man, they have been an over cashing machine. I'd ride that here, Joe. Ride the trend, and that is the Miami Hurricanes to the over. Let's go over 63.5 in the ATL to kick us off on Saturday.
And it's funny, Drew, another thing that the Canes apparently with Cam Ward just love to have a big fourth quarter and are usually, for some reason, trailing by the third quarter. I know they were losing to Duke last week in the third quarter. Then, of course, the fourth quarter came. I think they had like three or 2 or 3 touchdown drives there in succession in the fourth quarter to put the game away. But that was, 52 points, to your point there, that they threw up, which they're more than capable of doing in every game. I don't know do we have any idea? We'll look it up, what the team total is, because I would imagine, Drew, if it's 35 or more, it's probably not enough. It just feels like this is going to be one of those games. Now, the game last year, don't forget, I believe that was Miami had like a 450 to 200 yard edge in yards, but remember how it was pouring that game. The rain was out of control. Weather won't be an issue in this game here, Drew. It's going to be a fast track for both these teams. Feels like, why not? Team totals over for both teams?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to split the bet, I'm not going to talk anybody off of a Miami team total over. I mean, they've been cashing that, obviously, with Cam Ward behind center. But, I personally went with the over. It was 63 flat. Now we've seen a little tick up here, 63 in the hook, but still very manageable. And another thing, you bring up the Duke game, Joe. And, at first glance, I kind of went, man, Georgia Tech, if Haynes King's playing, maybe put that 11 in your pocket. But just like with last week with Duke, it's kind of a similar profile, I guess you could call it, Duke and Georgia Tech. You were kind of on the right side. It's just late in the fourth quarter, Miami's going to keep scoring here. So Duke was up like 30 ATS points. They were up multiple scores and catching points. And Miami just kind of steamrolled them in the fourth quarter. That could happen again. Therefore, I almost think like Georgia Tech and Miami, it's a little bit correlated, or the Georgia Tech, plus the points might be correlated with the over. Because if they're able to stay within this number, that back door could be open as well. Similar to last year, maybe not in that dramatic a fashion. But yeah, Joe, I see points in the ATL up and over 63.5 for me.
I'm with you. Number one in totals and scoring offense in the country. And Ralph is throwing something. You swatting flies, Ralph? What's going on there? What are we doing?
No, Joe, I was seeing. Are you able to grab a picture I threw in Slack or not?
Oh, yes. Let me hold on, Ralph. Let me see what we got here, because this looks like it's going to be fun.
I just want to show people. This is from the Gold Sheet logs. And the Gold Sheet logs, the new logs this year, are amazing. They have first quarter lines and totals, first half lines and totals, and full game lines and totals. And when you see these logs for Miami of Florida, you're going to see that in the first half against the spread, they are only 1-5 against the spread the last 6 games. But full season, they are 5-4 and 8-1 to the over. So slow starts. But take a look at that first half log for Miami and just how poorly they played in the first half and how they've notched it up in the second half.
Something tells me, Ralph, here that we might be considering maybe a first half Georgia Tech play here at some point along the lines. I don't hate that either. They are slow starters, unfortunately. But boy, oh boy, I'd be looking to make a second half wager, Drew. On Miami, if they are down at the break, I promise you I'll be back in Miami in the second half across the board in that one. All right, the U, can they keep it going? They came out, I think, the number 4 team in the country in the opening committee meeting here. We'll see if that can continue to win over Georgia Tech. And Rob Veno, another interesting game coming up here. And boy, what the hell happened to Navy? They came back down to reality in a heartbeat, didn't they? The question is, South Florida, who I believe is maybe a win away from bowl eligibility, their quarterback, is he back? Is he not back? I guess maybe that's the big question here for South Florida. What does Navy's fall keep happening? Oh, this is where we meet. Go ahead. Oh, we reading lips? Let's see it. Oh, okay. We're reading lips now. All right, let's go. Hi, Rob Veno. Might have to refresh that, Rob. We got you. We'll get it on there. But to this point here, South Florida and at home taking on Navy, and Navy is just, listen, we all thought that the minute they got to top 25 that they were going to be, this was it for Army and Navy this year, right? But boy, have they fallen from the graces here in the last couple of games. And that had everything. Oh, there he is. And that had everything to do with, I think, Notre Dame bringing them back down to reality there, Veno. So what are you thinking, though? Is this a Navy team you think can bounce back, or do you have just too many questions regarding South Florida to want to back them in this spot?
Yeah, probably a lot of questions about both, right, Joe? But it's a game of contrast, for sure. South Florida and, Alex Golish, ex-Josh Heupel assistant, they are currently the fastest tempo team in the country. He made it that way last year. It's continued on this year, and they're only getting faster. You look at their last 3 games. They're snapping the ball every 19.7 seconds. Fastest in the country. Navy, obviously, the more methodical rushing attack. So you got that contrast. You have that with Navy almost every game. But neither team, I don't think, Joe, in this instance, has the defensive makeup to really shut down the other side. It's kind of evidenced by last year's game. It ended 44-30, 74 points on the board. It was played in Annapolis. South Florida had 435 total yards, 338 through the air without a pick. As you mentioned, though, the quarterback in that game was Byron Brown, who's been out for 3 games now. Bryce Archie's been the starter for USF. Not the same guy. We'll get into that a little bit down the road here. But for Navy last year, they had 330 total yards, 280 on the ground, 5 yards per pop. So nobody really stopped at anybody. What's interesting to note is that Navy scored 4 times in that game, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, 23 points worth on drives of 30 yards or less. Great short field scoring position for Navy last year. They had a 1-play, 68-yard touchdown drive. So a lot of their points came very quickly, very easily. We'll see if they can do the same here. The USF run defense, I think when you take your first look at the numbers overall, you think, wow, this is a pretty good run defense. But then when you get in there and examine it, as with a lot of stats for a lot of teams, you find out that the first glance doesn't tell the true story. USF's run defense, that 3.9 yards per rush allowed, is solely built on games against FCS Bethune-Cookman, 98th ranked rushing team UAB, 117th ranked rushing team Southern Miss. Other than that, they allow every other team they played 179 to 199 rushing yards. That's good news for Navy. This hybrid wing T that they brought in is a different breed. They're number 5 in the country running the football. 6.8 yards per play, 10th nationally, and Blake Horvath running the show. They've been pretty good. Now, let's get to the deficiency that you talked about. Since that Notre Dame game, this offense has gone straight downhill. Against Notre Dame, 310 total yards. I mean, that's okay against Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame's a really good defense, but only 14 points. But last week, it's inexcusable to get 140 rushing yards, 120 passing yards, 260 total yards, and a season low 4.26 yards per play against Rice. And Rice's only asset defensively this season is their pass rush. They sack the quarterback. They don't defend the run, yet they shut Navy's run down. You have to ask yourself, was it just because they fired head coach Bloomgren and the team got a boost? We often talk about, the interim head coach boost. Maybe that was it. But there's no reason for Navy to play that poorly last week. I'd have to believe they bounce back a little bit this year and this week, and get back to the norm. Rush it real well against this defense. Last season's game, like I mentioned, despite the fact that Navy scored on so many short drives, they still ran for 5 yards a carry. South Florida's defense is really no better this year. And the team goes so fast that the defense is hung out on the field all the time. Got to also note that last year, Blake Horvath was a reserve quarterback. He got into this game. But that offense last year for Navy was terrible. And this will be the first time on field that USF sees this hybrid wing T that Drew Cronick has brought to the Navy side. So we'll see if that doesn't give them some problems. The Byron Brown injury is still up in the air, questionable. We have Bryce Archie. We'll go with this analysis on the assumption that Bryce Archie is the quarterback. He's not a running threat. So that takes away what half of what Byron Brown does, And his passing hasn't been very good whatsoever. What they have been good at the last 3 weeks is running the football. And last week's 319 yards on the ground against FAU made life easy for Bryce Archie, who actually posted his highest passer rating. Navy doesn't stop the run, guys. Their run statistics are not good. So again, I said this in the beginning, but I don't know that either side has the defensive makeup to stop either team here. USF's going to go super fast. It's going to be between 88 and 90 degrees in Tampa on Saturday. That's liable to wear Navy down a little bit, help USF out. If you took 2 short field touchdowns off of that game result last year, you'd still be left with 60 points on your total. This number is only 56.5. I thought it was short. Navy, for what it's worth, for their last 6 games have gone 59 or better. USF, for what it's worth, 5 of their last 7 have gone 58 or better. Again, the number here is 56.5. So I think you'll get more than that. I think you get over 56.5 in that game.
Ooh, all right, up and over in that game there. Wouldn't shock me. Navy's got to get back to running the ball and running it well, though, Rob, to your point. The last couple of weeks has been brutal, but to their defense, getting destroyed by Notre Dame might bring you down to reality here a little bit. But points, I'm with you. With that tempo, I definitely think are coming. So we've got 3 games in the books here. We got 2 games. We're going to go roundtable style here. And, of course, one of them will be starting to get to be a very interesting game with South Carolina and Vanderbilt. A lot of folks liking Vandy in this spot. I don't know about that. We'll see what these guys think. But, of course, the SEC has a couple of de facto elimination games coming up this week, and one of them involves Georgia and Ole Miss. And I do want to just remind you guys, if you have any questions and you're joining us live here on the stream, go ahead and drop them in the chat room there. Any games on this Week 11 slate you want to talk about, we'll go ahead and get a couple of questions and talk about a few of those games. Drop them in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, go ahead and drop them in the comments section. We will monitor right up until kickoff and get you any answers to those questions. Don't forget, a thumbs up and a like would be very appreciated. And, of course, the subscribe button is always helpful here as Georgia and Ole Miss getting ready to go at it at Ole Miss. I mean, listen, as it stands right now, you've got Georgia who, let's face it, they kind of screwed the pooch here a little bit against Bama. But they are also going to, right now, the way it stands, they lose the tiebreaker with LSU and Texas A&M. So if they lose this game, this is not great for Georgia. Ole Miss already has 2 SEC losses. Another loss in this game pretty much puts Ole Miss on the outside looking in. So, I mean, Ralph, a lot of people will be like, I can't see Georgia not making the playoffs. Well, Georgia may not even play for the SEC championship if they lose this game. So there is a lot in this Week 11 in the SEC that is still up for grabs. But one of these teams has got to win, and they'll be in a pretty good spot to represent. One team who loses, Ralph, boy, is that an uphill battle. Which team do you think is victorious in this one?
Well, statistically, when you look at conference-only schedules, they played the number 7 toughest schedules. And you look at Ole Miss, their stat profile is much better. They are actually number 9 at plus 1.63 yards per play. Georgia's number 26. Not bad, but again, Ole Miss has the edge. When I look at Ole Miss, you think about, you think Lane Kiffin, you think of their offense. Their defense is number 1 in the country in sacks. They have 41 sacks, once every 13% of every pass attempt. And in conference games, they're also number 1 in sacks. Well, let's look at the Georgia O-line. Georgia O-line has allowed more than 2 sacks, only 3 games. So a solid job for them. They've only allowed 10 sacks. But again, you're looking at the strength of their opponents. In those games where they allowed 2 or more sacks, they allowed 3 to Bama, 2 to Auburn, 2 to Florida. Guess what? They're 0-3 ATS in that game. And then I think back and I think about Georgia going to Texas and getting a good win. And I said, well, Texas has the better stat profile, but do they have pressure hosting this first game, the first year in the SEC? Now, Ole Miss hasn't hosted many huge games as well, but they have been in the SEC for a while. So when I went back to look at Ole Miss at home against AP top 20 teams, as the favorite, they're only 2-11 against the spread. But as a dog, they're 4-0 against the spread against ranked teams. So that means when Ole Miss is at home, the dog is 15-2 ATS when they're playing a ranked foe. Ole Miss is one of 5 teams this year to outgain every opponent they played. And when you look at Georgia's 3 SEC road games, it is not the same Georgia we're accustomed to. They outgained in 2 of 3 of those games. And in Texas, even with the win, they only had a 24-yard edge. Carson Beck, a 12-3 ratio his first 5 games. His last 2 games, guys, he has a 2-6 ratio. Again, this is not the Georgia quarterback situation that we're accustomed to seeing. And Lane Kiffin, he started his career 2-7 as an away dog, but he did upset Bama in 2022. He upset LSU last year. So in his last 2 years, he has pulled an SEC upset at home. I will say this. I think Ole Miss has enough talent on offense and defense to get it done this week. and I will lean with the Rebels and, again, maybe knock Georgia out of the playoff contention.
It's kind of crazy, but parity has taken a hold here, Drew, especially in the SEC, because there's no way around it. I mean, if 2 losses is the cutoff, right, and you're not going to sniff the top 12 if you have more than 2 losses, well, then Ole Miss, Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, they have to win the SEC or they'll be left out of the playoffs. They can't all make it from the SEC. So these games, especially this one for Ole Miss, boy, oh boy, I wish they could have that Kentucky game back. We'd be having a different discussion. But do you have enough confidence at home that their defense can do enough to limit Georgia and actually win this game?
Could they, Joe? Yeah, I do think they can. And you bring up some interesting kind of just projections here with these SEC, even Big Ten teams. If you get that 3rd loss, are you eliminated? We're kind of in uncharted waters. We don't 100% know how this is going to work out. There also could be, it's possible, like a SEC team, that 3rd team that misses the SEC championship game, do they actually find their way in? I'm not necessarily ruling that out of the question. It will be interesting to watch who makes the playoffs. I mean, for this game, what a game. I'm excited about it. We've already seen Lane Kiffin kind of complain that it's not a night game, to kind of Ralph's point there, that they've been good as the home dog, getting all hydrated there in the Grove for the night games. This is a 3:30 Eastern, so 2:30 local time. And keep in mind, guys, this is Kirby Smart versus Lane Kiffin. This is the Alabama offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator in 2014, 2015, winning a couple national championships, facing off against each other. These two kind of programs know what they're going to do on each side. I'll go with this, Joe. Georgia's 0-6 as a favorite. I mean, they have not been covering numbers, but Kirby Smart really isn't, he's of that Nick Saban kind of defensive minded, not looking to run it up on your opponent. However, all of those but one, they were favored by more than 2 touchdowns. This is kind of a different type bet here. -2 and a hook is available. It's pretty much a split line right now, guys. If you like Ole Miss, grab the 3. If you like Georgia, 2.5 is out there. Georgia is 49-0 against all teams not named Alabama. This is a heck of a run they've put on. Now, Ole Miss last week against Arkansas, really showing it, scoring more than 60 points. The problem is Georgia's a lot more talented than Arkansas is. And Carson Beck throwing all those interceptions for Georgia, it is worrisome here, but they did play Florida and Texas, 2 solid teams there. Not that Ole Miss isn't. Joe, great game. I can't wait to watch it. And to tell you the truth, I'll probably take the opposite side of Ralph. I think Georgia's the more talented team. And at this price point, I think they find a way to win it. So I think it's a little bit short on the Bulldogs. So -2.5. Give me Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, make it 50-0 against all teams not named Alabama.
Yeah, Drew, to your point, Georgia tends to play down the competition, which is why they don't cover any of those big spreads when they're big favorites, but they certainly seem to elevate Texas when they play some teams worth playing here. And Rob Veno, we got a split decision on the side here. I got a feeling that you will lean towards the total in one way, shape, or form in this one, because I'm having a hard time getting to an over here, Veno, with this number at 55, with, quite honestly, the 2 defenses, maybe the best units out there. Injury concerns Ole Miss. I believe their stud wide receiver is still questionable whether he's going to play in this one. But can somebody please explain to me what the hell happened to Carson Beck, who now has 11 interceptions, which is the most by a Georgia quarterback since you're ready for this, Rob? Aaron Murray back in 2011. How is that? 11 INTs, and I think 5 or 6 have come in the last couple of weeks. Does he have the yips here, Veno? Like, can we trust Carson Beck on the road in a big game right now?
Well, they're going to have to force him to have the yips, Joe, because that injury report that you described got a whole lot worse yesterday. Now, for Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss is the better team when they're healthy. Let's put that right out there. But offensively, I mean, they just take a huge blow here. Their top running back, Henry Parrish, is out of this game.
Right.
They're going to go with Ulysses Bentley. You might remember him from SMU. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Bentley's a good running back. But it's the receiving corps. Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins, both now doubtful. Now, for a guy who had Ole Miss, Arkansas over the total last week in that 63-35, whatever it was, Jordan Watkins, we know about Trey Harris. He's been banged up every week for the last 4 weeks. Watkins last week scored 5 TDs, had 254 receiving yards, and now he's doubtful as well. If you combine Harris and Watkins and take them out of this passing game, what you lose is 84 receptions, 1,536 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns. Their average per catch, these two guys, is 16.7 yards for Harris, 21.9 for Watkins. Caden Lee is their number 2 wide receiver as far as receptions is concerned, and now he's questionable. He may go. If you lose all 3, forget about it. 2 out of 3 is bad enough. And it really levels the playing field for Georgia. It takes a lot away from Jackson Dart as far as the passing game is concerned. I know it's ranked 1 in the country, and it looked amazing last week, and they can do without one guy. They've shown they can do without Harris a little bit, but without Harris and Watkins, there's no way I'm playing Ole Miss, especially at under a field goal. It basically resorts them to being somewhat of a, let's just say, quick screen, running type team, which I think Georgia can now crowd the line a little bit against Ole Miss here. And Ole Miss, for what it's worth, you know, I've been on them a lot this year, but they're always their own worst enemy. They shouldn't have the record that they have. They have the record that they have because they shoot themselves in the foot. They're as good as anybody in the country at turning 7 points into 3 or 0, move the ball straight down the field, then do something stupid, typical of Lane Kiffin teams, whether it be penalty, turnover, whatever. And if they do that here against Georgia, they're going to be in trouble. I'm not all that big on this year's Georgia squad, but a couple of points made by all 3 of you guys. They went to Texas and won. Texas was far more healthier and far more equipped offensively than Ole Miss will be in this game. To Ralph's point, Ole Miss probably better suited for a big SEC game at home, but they haven't won a bunch of them. So I don't think that there's any way I won't be laying 2.5 with Georgia here within the next, by the time we end the show or the next hour here, because I just don't see Ole Miss without those 2 players and possibly 3 doing enough damage offensively against Georgia's defense. And at some point in time, Carson Beck and company will do damage against Ole Miss. And again, one more time, I'll say this. Ole Miss's defensive statistics look nice. They have fallen a little bit since SEC play has started. And you see a couple of holes in there. The pass rush is tremendous, so Carson Beck better look out. We'll see if Georgia does something to prevent that. But this injury list puts me squarely on Georgia.
Georgia, it is there again. Going to be very difficult with 5 conference champions getting those top 5 spots. That means 7 spots for the at-large bids are available for the playoffs. I'd be shocked if we get a 3-loss team even considered in that spot. So these are some big games coming up this week by far. And we got a lot of teams playing for bowl games, let's not forget, trying to be bowl eligible. Not everyone came into the season expecting to win a national championship, although everyone pretends like that's the ultimate goal. Well, yeah, no. Not if you're Vanderbilt. Vandy, who has been fantastic this year, backing as an underdog. They've made guys a lot of money. They got a spot here this week taking on South Carolina here. And Ralph, I'll come to you here. How much more can Vandy do here? I mean, people I know over the last couple of weeks just keep feeling like the wheels are about to fall off. South Carolina coming off a pretty nice game. Is this something that we should be looking at here? Is Vandy the play, or do you think South Carolina is getting it rolling right now?
Well, first, hats off to Clark Lee. You are coach of the year already, no matter what happens.
I agree.
Although
Signetti's on line 2, Ralph. Signetti, line 2?
Yeah, but
I'm just saying.
He was a winning coach that brought over a program. But I will say this. It is November. Joe, when's the last time we talked about Vanderbilt football in November? Let's see. That would have been 2013 when James Franklin had a 9. Oh, yeah. The WagerTalk hadn't even started back in 2013, the last time they got to 9 wins. And James Franklin left Vanderbilt to go to Penn State. I will say this. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. I shouldn't say smoke and mirrors. A lot of it is just a slow-paced Vanderbilt team that doesn't make any mistakes, that doesn't really give up a lot of sacks, that runs the ball 39 times. It's not great. Diego Pavia, a 15-3 ratio is awesome. But if you look at entire stat profile year to date, South Carolina has played a far tougher schedule. And they are number 42 in yards per play diff. Vanderbilt is 110. That is massive. To have a team 110 that actually has a winning record is pretty amazing. When you look at South Carolina, if you like sacks, then you should watch every Gamecock game there is. On offense, they're number 127 on sacks allowed. On defense, they're number 4. So they're top 5 in both worst offensive line sacks allowed and best defensive line sacks allowed. You had mentioned Vanderbilt as a dog, 8-0. Oh, yeah, let's also add that as an FBS favorite, Vanderbilt is 0-2. So when Vanderbilt's playing an FBS team, the dog a perfect 8-0 this season. The one reason, now that may keep me off actually betting South Carolina, because South Carolina did go to Kentucky. They only had a 69-yard edge, but it ended up being a 31-6 win. They went to Alabama, good game. They lost by 2. They went to Oklahoma, another good game. So they have proven going to Kentucky and Oklahoma and covering against Bama, 3-0 ATS on the road, that they can handle that pressure. But the biggest thing for me is this. It's Vanderbilt has not faced a very tough pass defense. And I'm not saying Vanderbilt has not played good pass offenses. I'm not saying South Carolina is a good pass offense, but they run the ball for 44% of the time, 44 carries per game. And they do have some quarterback play where they don't make many bad mistakes. So I'm going to lean South Carolina. I'm not going to get there, but I think one important point for our viewers to note, there's a lot of times that I know you'll say the same thing, Rob will say the same thing, and Drew says the same thing. When you're handicapping a game for this week, but you find a matchup that might be advantageous for you next week, make sure you're writing those notes and put that back in play. And this is what I'll share with you. Vanderbilt's opponents have pass offenses of number 113, 46, 70, 42, 123, 66. Texas was 13, Auburn 44, South Carolina 103. On the road, they played at Georgia State, at Missouri with a number 70 pass offense, at Kentucky with a number 23 offense, and at Auburn with a number 44 offense. Next week, Vanderbilt goes to LSU with their number 6 pass offense, and as long as LSU doesn't get brutalized this week, I think LSU next week will absolutely crush Vanderbilt.
Oh, all right. Thinking LSU, maybe look for that. It's Drew. I mean, when you see that plus number for a home team in this spot, you usually go, hey, interesting. And who the hell is South Carolina to be laying, more than a field goal here on the road against anybody? You had mentioned it earlier, right? Our big motto, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, Vanderbilt getting points in this spot has been pretty profitable this year, but is it broke? Drew, are we anticipating maybe a South Carolina figured some things out here and they are worth the play as a road favorite?
You know what, Joe? I don't think they are. I like Vanderbilt here. The not broken, don't fix it. And Vanderbilt, man, have they been cashing tickets? Yep. Pavi at the quarterback position. You bring up Clark Lee. I mean, the head coach there. It's amazing what kind of new age college football has done. Rewind a couple years, Vanderbilt breaks ground on a $300 million renovation to the stadium and football facilities. They're like, man, we're making so much money here in the SEC. What $50 million payout a year for these SEC teams? Vanderbilt's like, man, we can't get kicked out of this conference. So sure enough, they pour in money and it's starting to work here, guys. They're well coached. They got the players. This is not your grandma's Vanderbilt. I know South Carolina now has won 15 straight in this series. They used to be in the SEC East division, but I go back to this is not the same Vanderbilt. And Joe, also throw out there, I mean, South Carolina, what they've been able to do as well. Ralph just pointed on some of it in their defensive front. I think it could cause Vanderbilt some problems. But when you look at Vanderbilt and what they've been able to do, they're a team in the SEC. Remember, they lost to Georgia State, but they only have 2 SEC losses, and they have the tiebreaker over Alabama? I mean, if it does come down to it, this team's actually not out of the SEC race. And when you look at what South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee, if they are able to pull off the surprising victories here down the stretch, it is a tough run. Man, what a crazy time that would be to see Vanderbilt possibly in the SEC championship. This team isn't out of it. Joe, I mean, catching points here with Vanderbilt, how can you not just take it? You know, that's what this season has kind of taught us here as sports bettors, man. And hey, I'm riding it. I'm not one to kind of pick against them here. So I've been on Vanderbilt a bunch, and I'm not stopping now. It's a home game in Nashville. They'll be ready to rock. I think they find a way to stay within the number and win a close one here. So sprinkle a little bit on the money line. Give me the Commodores here, Joe.
All right, Vandy it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, unless that finger is broke, have you actually hit the thumbs up for us yet? That would be great. Also, the subscribe button would be nice in case any of your other fingers work. Just go ahead and click, guys. It's pretty simple. Go ahead and become part of that WagerTalk TV family as we're going to get to Rob's breakdown of this South Carolina Vanderbilt game. Plus, we've got a few games that are coming in the chat room that we're going to break down for you. I love some of these games that you guys have brought up here. So if you have one, drop it in there. We'll get to as many as we can. As Rob Veno, listen, last week on the show, I can't remember if it was this or on Friday's edition, everybody was all hot on Auburn. Everyone thought that was the week that we're going to fade Vandy and they're going to get caught. And they were pretty much outgained across the board, and yet they still won the game 17-7 because Auburn, well, they can't get out of their own way. And Drew knows that too. So what are we doing with Vandy this week? Because it does feel like there's a lot of South Carolina love here. Is it warranted?
So much of what everybody has said so far is really accurate, and all it does is present both sides of this game and a case for both sides to be made. This game's as difficult as it gets, and generally speaking, if I'm in that type of situation and I really want to play, I'll just take the dog and take the points. But I think, Joe, the love for South Carolina, we say it a lot in the handicapping industry. It's what people saw last. If South Carolina did not go for 530 total yards last week against Texas A&M of all teams. I mean, offensively, South Carolina hasn't done that all season long. Question is, was it a mirage, or is it like last year where Shane Beamer kind of brought his team on at the end of the year? And last year he had a heck of a lot more problems. Remember Spencer Rattler playing behind 9 different offensive lines his first 9 games last year. This year they don't have those problems, but they don't have Spencer Rattler either. And I'll say this, if you're going to bet quarterbacks, Diego Pavia over Lenora Sellers every day of the week, for me at least. I mean, Lenora Sellers is a nice dual threat, but as far as consistency or dependability, I'm not so sure he's the guy. I do think that when a big play needs to be made, you'd rather have Pavia on your side. As for Vanderbilt against decent throwing quarterbacks this year, I mean, they did play Brady Cook, Luther Burden, and company way back at the beginning of the season when Missouri was totally healthy. Not when Brady Cook was broken down, not when Luther Burden was broken down as Missouri starts to sink down the pass offense yards per game charts. They were much better back then. Vandy went there and played a really close game. They faced Jalen Milroe. They faced Quinn Ewers. All 3 of those guys, if we were going to draft, we're taking them all way ahead of Lenora Sellers. So Vandy's been tested by quarterbacks this year. However, South Carolina, to me, you just feel that surge with this team, right? I think I said it a little bit ago that it seems like Shane Beamer is bringing them along as the season goes on. That defensive pass rush has been in place. They have been very, very inconsistent offensively. But again, you have to make the decision whether or not last week's game against A&M is real or if it was just one of those games. I'm not sure. For that reason, I would probably lean Vanderbilt. My first inclination was to get on South Carolina here, but you start going over what they've done again offensively all season long. Nothing they do offensively poses a threat to Vanderbilt, a huge threat to Vanderbilt defensively. Nothing more than what they've seen 3-4 times already this season. Texas came here, only won by 3 in Nashville. I'm not so sure South Carolina can do better than that. So for me, I like both teams, but I think I would be on Vanderbilt. The one thing you have to worry about with South Carolina and Beamer is, much like his dad, special teams could play a factor here. They've been really good with special teams and some trick plays this year. So Clark Lee's got to be on the lookout for that stuff.
Yeah, no, it certainly does here. I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I think Sam in the chat room has brought up a great point. Vandy, I believe, with 6 wins now is already bowl eligible. South Carolina needs another win in order to be bowl eligible. So, I mean, Ralph, when you start getting to this time of year, and I know you can get the pen and the database to work here, but teams that need that one other win to be bowl eligible, is it a motivating factor? Have you seen over the years this late in the season where they're trying to get to that point where some teams who, listen, they're not going to play for a national championship, but they already have that 6th win. They're already going bowling some way, shape, or form. Is there any correlation or any extra motivation in those spots?
Joe, I can tell you when the team gets to 5 and 6 and they're a dog in the last game, that's a negative. So that I will say. I did forget to mention one thing, Joe, and this really just expands when you said how the SEC has so much parity this year. In conference games, if you blindly bet every SEC dog this year, Drew and Rob, think of a percentage in your head.
Ooh.
If you blindly bet every SEC dog this season, you are 30-12, 71.4%.
What?
And if you just bet every SEC dog of 3.5 and higher, you are 25-8, 76% this season.
Damn. That shock you, Drew? But that's parity right there. To me, those numbers, that screams parity there, Drew. That the market has been way off on the SEC, it feels like, all year long, no?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think like, I knew it was a lot, Joe. I knew it was a great bet. I didn't know it was that great of a bet.
Wow.
And I guess Ralph's leaning South Carolina man. I mean, that's kind of some ammo for the Vanderbilt side. And I think it speaks to, with the transfer market, Joe, if some of these guys that would normally go to Alabama and Georgia, and then they realize they're not getting the playing time they want, and they can just transfer the next year and maybe go play for teams like, Vanderbilt even. And we're seeing the talent disparity, the money come in for a lot of these programs. And I think it's starting to show here. So I think this is something that we can use not only this year, but moving forward. I'm going to really pump the brakes on just laying it with the favorites and conference play in the SEC.
Yep, I like that. It's a very interesting number with the SEC teams and dogs here this year. All right, we've got a couple questions that have come in on the chat room like we do each and every week. And again, if you're watching this on the replay and you have a question, drop them in the comment section. Of course, we'll be in the comment section right up till kickoff on Saturday for you. So if you got a question, don't be afraid to drop it in there. Also, that like and subscribe button would be nice of you. Thank you very much. Shout out to Instagram as well as TikTok, X, YouTube Shorts, as well as the crazies in our YouTube feed. Roger Long, FB coach in the house. And let's dive into some of these games here. And we'll start with, and Rob, I'm going to come to you. Penn State off a loss, asks Adam. Any chance to cover the 13.5 here against Washington, who I think we can all agree doesn't travel east very well? Nice win at home last week, but not exactly a team that has shown a great propensity to come out east Just look at that Rutgers game is enough to make you want to throw up. But what do you think about Penn State? And Ralph, I don't know if you have the database handy, but maybe you can tell us what Penn State and Franklin is off a loss in the following game. I'm wondering what that number is. What are you thinking of this one here, Veno, with Penn State? Are they worth backing at this number?
Boy, I'm not sure, Joe. I'm really not. Now, if we're going to build a case for Penn State, you probably start with the travel situation for Washington, right? We talked about this in the beginning of the year, that when it got to November and these teams have crisscrossed the country 2-3 times, it starts to get old and wear on you by the third time. I understand that maybe you're a little more used to it, but it's a long season. And from Seattle to Happy Valley might be one of the longest trips you could possibly make in this particular conference. I guess Rutgers would be the only other one, and Washington certainly went there to start the season. So travel can't be good for Washington. The situation can't be good for Penn State. I live in the area. I know a whole bunch of Penn State alums. If they could have kicked James Franklin out the door 5 years ago, they would have done so. But somehow he sticks. He lost another big game last week. He was as arrogant as ever behind the microphone. He gives the same stupid speech. And nothing ever gets any better. I don't know that as good as their defense is, it's totally good enough to cover 13.5 against Washington, because Washington is pretty multiple at this point in time, and Jed Fish's offense, the playbook, which I'm generally not a fan of first year, Washington seems to have performed with pretty well. Last week, a big win for them against USC may propel them into this one. We'll see. I think Penn State wins the game. They're the more talented team on each side. But the quarterback position, again, you're taking 13.5 probably with the better quarterback here. Will Rogers is far more capable than what Penn State's putting out on the field right now. Drew Alder's a lot of accolades and non-performance, and then when they go to the backup, it's still not good. So I think Washington probably plus 13.5 is the way I would lean, Joe. I wouldn't be opposed to anybody playing over the total here either. To me, Penn State showed it against USC in that game where they traveled west. It got to be a pretty high-scoring game. The same might happen here in this one.
All right, Mike, on it there. Any luck, Ralph, in the data? Oh, there he is. He's throwing the pen at us again. What do you got, Ralph?
As long as you're going to give me an easy query like that, Joe, I have no problems. You can't say, if you had more third downs than your opponent in the first 5 minutes of the game, that's going to take me a while.
Different,
all right,
yes.
Well, let me start with this. Let me start with saying Penn State has lost 5 home games since 2020. They are a perfect 5-0 ATS the game after, covering by 11 points per game. So not only winning, but covering by double digits. Now, I'm going to give you 2 negatives, but there are asterisks to both of those. If an AP top 5 team is off a home loss, they were an AP top 5 team prior to last game. If they're off a home loss, they're only 5-10 against the spread. An AP top 10 team off a home loss, 24-31, 44% against the spread. But again, this season is entirely different. When you were an AP top 5 or you used to be an AT top 10 and you lost, boom, that is bubble burst. You are done. But Penn State may actually be better off having lost to Ohio State. You know, Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State will all make the playoffs as long as one of them doesn't do something stupid. So Penn State not winning the Big Ten, having 1 loss, not having to play that championship game may be the best thing that ever happens for them. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's good old Franklin. Boy, just when you thought you could rely on him finally to beat Ohio State, not happening there. All right, a couple other interesting games of note here being asked in the chat. And Drew, let me ask you about Clemson here, because we do have a bunch of folks thinking that maybe Clemson throws in a towel. They're taking on Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. And Clemson, how the hell they lost that game is beyond me. But here we are, Clemson once again now 2 losses, maybe not even playing for an ACC championship. I mean, what can we trust Clemson to go to Blacksburg and regroup here? I don't know if Virginia Tech is healthy, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. Virginia Tech health, the quarterback and running back position is something to take notice of. Yeah, Clemson, I mean, you hit on it, kind of up and down season. You know, Joe, I watched pretty much every play of that Virginia Tech Syracuse game last week, and I felt like Virginia Tech was the much better team. They ended up losing the game. I actually thought that their backup quarterback, he's pretty good. He's like a 5th or a 6th year senior. He can throw the ball down the field. He runs it as well. So I wouldn't penalize them too much if they have to go with the backup again. And to tell you the truth, at home in Blacksburg, I don't want to lay this number. I mean, they're going to have to win by a touchdown, win by margin here. I don't know that I trust the Clemson Tigers. However, they are probably the more talented team, but tough place to play. If you make me bet it, Joe, I would take the Hokies plus the 6 in the hook here.
Drew, I'm kind of with you, man. I saw that game too, and I got the same impression you did. I thought they were the better team. I'll tell you right now, they're the better special teams group on that field in that game there. And in Blacksburg, never an easy place to go in and play there. So Dabo's got his hands full right now with Clemson and what the future of that is going to look like. Ralph, we do have a question coming in on, we talk much like Washington traveling east. What about Iowa going west? Iowa at home is one thing. Iowa traveling to take on UCLA, who nobody wants to seem to give any credit to, but this team has gotten better and better as the season has gone along. I think back-to-back road wins now, covers and road wins, I believe, for UCLA, Nebraska, and Rutgers. Now they're home. Iowa on the road, are they going to drop 40 on UCLA? It seems like they're dropping 40 points every game now, Ralph. What the hell's going on with Iowa? Are they going to come back down to life here?
Well, you look at an Iowa team that, went from being the lowest total team to now crushing the overs. Again, 40 against Wisconsin to me, that to me was by far the best win of the season. Not the 32 points, but when you watch that game, the eye test, the 422 to 261 yard edge was clearly Iowa was the better team. But you have to worry. They went to Minnesota. They had a 46-yard edge, but they only won that game because they were plus 2 turnovers. Right. You go to Ohio State, you score 7 points and 226 yards. You go to Michigan State, you score 20 points and 283 yards. There is no way. They've only played 3 road games, and you look at their road numbers again, 281 yards per game, 13.3 first downs per game. They're only completing 58%. And again, UCLA is tough to back. And, last week I used UCLA on betting it against Nebraska. And someone says, well, why weren't they part of your play? And all I could do was thinking about watching Deshaun Foster in Big Ten Media Days and how I cannot bet on this guy. So to me, that's an overwhelming thought in my head that, he is going to get out coached against Ferentz. But as you said, you go to Nebraska, you go to Rutgers your past 2 games.
Yeah.
You had an 92-yard edge in both. You had 5 sacks, but you were sacked 5 times. But your quarterback is starting to play better. But again, I can't back Iowa and I can't back UCLA. On the season, they're averaging 74 yards rushing and 2.8 yards per carry. And the Iowa defense, the rush defense, is still holding foes to 3.6. So I will say this. I lean under in this game.
Oh,
UCLA wants to run the ball. Iowa, we know what they've done on the road. They're not going to pass like they do at home. Under for me.
Under for Ralph there. That makes the most. I think both defenses will show up there and shot. Although UCLA has been playing quite a few overs with Garbers finally figuring it out there. They can't run the ball, but they can certainly throw the ball there with UCLA. And we got one final one coming in. And Veno, I'll come back to you. And in fact, we'll get all 3 of your guys' opinions here. Army, Indiana, Rob Veno, both staying unbeaten by the time we meet again next week?
Yes, I would think so. By the time we meet next week, not end of season, but next week. Yeah, then I would say yes. And just a quick note here,
Sure.
Joe, we talked about Penns earlier in the show. That number that Ralph kicked out of the database about SEC dogs is why we all bring Penns to the
Yes.
broadcast here, because you got to write that stuff down. But as for Army, Indiana, I think they both win here. Army may win out. The schedule's so easy.
It is.
And Indiana, we'll see. But I think they'll win this week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Drew, I mean, it's, eventually, well, let's say regular season, because if Indiana, well, I mean, their season's really going to be all about Ohio State, which I believe is what, next week? Right. That game is next week. So, I get why somebody might be like, oh, maybe a little look ahead. Michigan has beaten them like 100 times over for like the last 50 years. So Indiana's history against Michigan has not been great. But I for one am just, everyone keeps waiting for Indiana to all of a sudden implode. I just don't think they're going to do it. Drew, they're too well coached. They don't shoot themselves in the foot, and they're better than Michigan. As crazy as that is, they're better than Michigan. I don't see Indiana losing this week in a look-ahead spot. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, 2 touchdown favorite. I think that they have the much better offense. I went against the Hoosiers a couple weeks ago, and this team's for real. Well coached. They got the talent. I like the Hoosiers. I even like them minus the 2 touchdowns. I think they win blowout city. I mean, this is the best team really in all of college football to be betting on. They're plus 17 ATS points, Joe. They're crushing what the odds makers are throwing out on them. And I think the other team you mentioned was Army. They only have 1 loss year to date. I don't think North Texas and that defense is going to be able to stop Army's ground attack. So I like Army and Indiana. Were those just the 2 teams you asked about?
Yeah, well, those 2, that seems to be, I've seen it now in a couple of different spots in the chat room. Everyone's questioning whether or not Indiana. By the way, Indiana has not been a favorite over Michigan since 1976, Ralph. So take that with your pen there. And Drew, everyone's question is, but to Rob's point, I think Army, that schedule is so ridiculous, they'll probably win out. Ralph, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? With these teams, if they're better than the teams they're playing, are you worried about a letdown spot with Indiana or Army?
Well, let me say this. If Daly's not playing, I like North Texas. So I think North Texas.
Wow.
I can, you look at what they did against Air Force. They had 14 first downs and 255 yards without Daly last week. And I have not read what his situation was. And he was the last hour, he was in an injury report, and he got scratched an hour before the game. Hence, that was their first non-cover of the season. I will say this, Joe, IU has a bye on deck. Oh no, I'm sorry. But my bad on that. I was looking up a trend. You had talked about Indiana. Is there a look ahead against Ohio State?
That's in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's actually, I think Chocolate Chip Scoochie, love that name, points out that Indiana, OSU, 2 weeks. OSU plays Purdue this week and then Northwestern the week after. So, but that's the next big one for them.
But listen to this. If you are a top 10 team and you have a bye, and your next opponent is also a top 10 team like Indiana is. So they are in this exact role this week.
Right.
This goes back to 2008. Top 10 teams with a bye and a top 10 opponent on deck, 96, 46, and 5, 67.6% against the spread.
Wow.
So if you are a top 10 team, there is no look ahead. If you got a bye on deck, these coaches have done a great job getting their teams prepped.
Yeah, no doubt there. This is Rob Veno. You got I see the pen twirling. What you got for us?
I just want to add to what Ralph said, obviously, about Bryson Daly, who's a huge part of that Army offense, the quarterback. Jeff Monken had said yesterday that they expected him to be able to practice by the end of the week, and that would determine whether or not he would play on Saturday. He said he's hopeful. So for those out there watching us or who will watch the recording, go ahead and check that status hour by hour, because it looks like the head coach doesn't want to say it, but feels like he'll go. We'll see what kind of shape he's in.
Yeah, he doesn't want. It doesn't sound like he wants to commit there. But I'm with you, Ralph. Backup quarterback. They didn't have him. They had the backup in last week. They still won 20-3, right? So, but my goodness, there is no defense being played by North Texas, but they can light you up in a heartbeat. There could be some points in that one here. So there you got it. Army, North Texas, Indiana taking on Michigan. Plus, we went over Georgia and Ole Miss for you guys. And plenty more still to come here. We got another round of the college football kickoff show tomorrow. 5 more games plus your questions. It certainly would behoove you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button for us if you're new to us here at WagerTalk TV. We appreciate that. Also, plenty going on at WagerTalk.com. Ralph Michaels, no doubt college basketball. Week 11 college football, the NFL Week 10 starts tonight here. What do you got rolling on your page at WagerTalk for us?
Well, the 5 winter American sports all playing at the same time. I've got a 5% college football play loaded for tomorrow. Ooh. And I do have a special if you're interested. The code RALPH199. 30 days of college football, NFL, college basketball, NBA, and NHL for $6.63 a day. Go to my homepage, wt.buzz/RM. Hit that 30-day package and save $100 with the code RALPH199.
Love that. Chocolate Chip Scoochie asking, by the way, Ralph, does Notre Dame play Army this year? I don't think so. Yes. I don't think that. Do they?
I thought they played.
They played Navy.
Yeah, they play Army. They played Army after Virginia. Yes, they do play them before USC. Yeah,
they did play Army. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Week 13, They play Army. There you go, Chocolate Chip Scoochie. We got you covered. Week 13 will be Army and Notre Dame. And boy, that's going to be an interesting one there too as well. Drew, come on, man. College hoops in full effect. Couple of days into the season here now. Plenty of college football. Your videos are crushing it. If you guys haven't seen Drew's videos covering it all, in fact, with college football, make sure you check out. Link is in the description there. But what do you got on your page ready to roll here, Drew, at WagerTalk.com?
Yeah, Joe, for the people watching here on Thursday, got a 5% NFL max limit on the Thursday nighter tonight. So it's been a heck of a run in the NFL, going well, and got the Friday card and Saturday card going to be posted by the end of the day. And then, of course, Sunday NFL comes back around. And yeah, college basketball, it's just getting going. I like to watch these teams play 1 or 2 games, and then I jump in. So with 7 of the last 8 college basketball seasons to the positive. So looking to add on to that this season. And like Ralph just talked about, guys, great time to jump on. Got an all-inclusive package the rest of the season. You'll get every play in every sport. So you can check that out, DrewMartinWagerTalk.com, and the 5% max limit going tonight, NFL, Joe.
I love it. All right, make sure you head over there to Drew's page at WagerTalk.com. That 5%er tonight, Thursday night football in the NFL. And Rob Veno, no doubt, we'll see you again tomorrow on the NBA tip-off show. We'll be back with a loaded slate tomorrow. It'd be good to get you back there for the NBA season. But what do you have locked, loaded, ready to roll at Wager Talk for us?
Yeah, 2 different sports tonight, Joe. NBA and college football, both up and available right now on my homepage. NBA, short card tonight, but we found one that we like a little bit, and also one of the 2 college football games up and available as well. So you can get it all right there, wt.buzz/RV. Watch a little college hoop the other night, Joe, and was, all the hype around the BYU kid, Igor Demon, seemed to be real. Boy, BYU going the NIL one-and-done route. Interesting to see BYU go that way.
Yeah, big old Russian kid. Boy, I tell you, Pope didn't leave the cupboards bare for BYU this year. That team can still shoot threes all day long. So they got some great pieces there, without a doubt. I thought maybe Central Arkansas would have scored more points, but they didn't. But hey, the good news is we do have the college basketball tip-off show starting next week. So get ready for that, plus the NBA tip-off show tomorrow with a loaded slate. In the meantime, no reason not to head over to WagerTalk.com. Ralph told you his 5% ready to go for tomorrow night college football. Drew's is tonight. And Rob Veno locked and loaded here on the hardwood. No reason not to make it a profitable Thursday here, guys. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up. We certainly appreciate it. Join us tomorrow. Teddy Covers will be here. Brian Leonard, Jesse Schul. 5 more college football week 11 games we're going to break down for you, plus your questions. Enjoy the night. Enjoy the games. Come back and join us again tomorrow. We'll see you again soon here on the College Football Kickoff Show.